During show and tell, my daughter brought Mommy's secret phone, the one I didn't even know existed. When the teacher called, her trembling voice told me everything my wife had worked so hard to hide. Okay, Reddit, I'm Bianca, and I'm 34. A nurse, a mom, and until very, very recently, I honestly thought I was living a pretty damn perfect life. Like the kind of life you see in commercials, all soft lighting and genuine smiles. My world felt stable, happy, and built on a foundation of trust so solid I never thought it could crack, let alone shatter into a million pieces. Man, was I wrong. My wife, Rocio, and our beautiful bright-eyed daughter, Alma, they were my whole universe. Rocio. She was always the one to preach about honesty. It was almost a mantra for her. She'd look at me, her eyes serious, and say, I grew up with so many secrets, Bianca. My parents, they just piled them up. I swore I'd never be like that. Not to the people I love, especially not to you and Alma. And I believed her, truly, deeply. Every fiber of my being absorbed that promise, that commitment to transparency. It made me feel so secure, so chosen. We live in this quiet, unassuming apartment complex in Montevideo, just a few blocks from the Rambla. It's not fancy, you know? Just a regular, comfortable place, but it's ours. There's a central courtyard where all the kids from the building bike around after school, their laughter echoing off the walls. Everyone generally knows each other, keeps an eye out. Senora Elena from downstairs would always bring up extra mate if she saw me looking tired after a night shift, and Alma would get cookies from the bakery owner on the corner. It felt like a little community, a little bubble of safety. On weekend mornings, Rocio and I would sit on our tiny balcony, sipping coffee, the salty air from the Rio de la Plata drifting in, planning our simple, happy days. Sometimes we'd just watch Alma drawing on the living room floor, her little head bent in concentration, and I'd feel this immense wave of contentment wash over me. This was it. This was the dream. I honestly, truly believed that Rocio's only secret was the extra bar of chocolate she'd occasionally hide behind the cereal boxes, a little treat for herself after a long day. I used to tease her about it. Seriously, Rocio? Another secret stash? And she'd just laugh, her eyes crinkling at the corners, that familiar warm laugh that used to make my heart swell. We had a good life, a loving family, and I felt completely, utterly secure in our marriage. Like we were impenetrable. Nothing could touch us. The idea of betrayal was so foreign, so utterly outside the realm of possibility for us, that I never even considered it. I was so deeply, tragically wrong. The illusion was perfect, and I was living inside it, breathing it, convinced it was real. I had no idea the foundations were already crumbling beneath my feet. Looking back now with the clarity of hindsight that feels like a punch to the gut, the cracks weren't just forming. They were already there, subtle as spiderwebs on a dusty window. But there. I refused to see them. Or maybe my mind, so fiercely protective of the beautiful life I thought we had, just painted over them with excuses and rationalizations. It started subtly, so subtly that I barely registered it at first. Rocio, who used to be home almost like clockwork, began having more and more late client nights. At first it was once a week, then twice, then sometimes 3 or 4 times. She'd call, usually around 7 p.m., just as Alma and I were finishing dinner, her voice a little tired, a little rushed. Hey, mi amor, she'd say. Another one's running late. Probably won't be home until after Alma's asleep. Don't wait up. I'd tell her to be careful, to not work too hard, and Alma would pout a little at the mention of her mom not being there for bedtime stories. I'd try to make it up to Alma, reading an extra chapter, making silly voices, but a quiet ache would settle in my chest. A small hollow space where Rocio's presence should have been. When she finally came home, sometimes well after midnight, I'd usually be asleep, or pretending to be. I'd hear the soft click of the lock, the gentle creak of the bedroom door as she slipped in, the rustle of her clothes as she changed in the dark. I never really saw her face on those nights, just felt the dip in the mattress as she got into bed, the faint scent of her perfume, different from the one she usually wore. Then there was the wardrobe. Rocio always had a great sense of style, but it was usually comfortable, practical for her work, which involved a lot of moving around. But suddenly, there was a shift. New clothes started appearing in her closet. Sleek, tailored blouses, skirts that hugged her figure just right, heels that weren't for walking miles, less of her usual comfy, casual wear, more polished almost. Sharp. I remember one evening, she came out of the bedroom in this deep emerald green dress, something I'd never seen before, and a pair of delicate gold earrings. She looked stunning, absolutely breathtaking. "Wow, Rocio," I'd said, my heart doing that little flutter it used to do. "You look incredible. Big client meeting?" She'd smiled a little too quickly and said, "Yeah, gotta look the part, you know. Professionalism." It made sense, right? She was ambitious, she wanted to succeed, and looking good was part of that. I just thought she was investing in her career. I even encouraged her, telling her how good she looked, how proud I was of her drive. My absolute, unwavering trust in her was so complete, so all-encompassing, that it acted like a blindfold, sealing my eyes shut to anything that might hint at something more sinister. I'm a nurse. I know stress. I know what it does to people, how it changes routines, how it can make you distant, exhausted. I blamed everything on her demanding job. Of course, she's working hard. She's doing it for us, for Alma. That was my mantra. I convinced myself she was just pushing herself to provide for us, to give Alma the best possible future. My own shifts were often grueling, leaving me drained, so I understood the exhaustion, the need to sometimes just collapse without having to explain every detail of the day. It felt selfish to demand more of her when she was clearly under so much pressure. Still, sometimes, in the quiet moments between Alma's bedtime and Rocio's return, or when I'd catch a glimpse of her face in the morning, a tiny, unsettling feeling would bubble up. It wasn't a thought, not a suspicion, more like a physical sensation. A faint shiver down my spine, a knot in my stomach that would quickly dissipate. A vague sense that something was just off. Like a note out of tune in a familiar melody. It was never concrete enough to truly worry me. Never enough to make me question my wife, my partner, the woman who swore she hated secrets. I'd just shake it off, blaming it on my own fatigue, or a particularly tough shift, or just the general anxieties of adult life. I was so good at rationalizing, so utterly convinced of her integrity, that I simply filed away these fleeting feelings as insignificant noise. I was in an echo chamber of my own making, where every sound affirmed the perfect harmony of our life, drowning out the discordant notes that were growing louder by the day. The call came in the middle of a particularly chaotic Tuesday morning at the hospital. I was charting, my mind half-fried from a difficult night shift, when my personal phone buzzed on the counter. Alma's school. My stomach did a little lurch, as it always does when the school calls unexpectedly, but I just figured Alma had forgotten her lunchbox again, or maybe scraped a knee during recess. Nothing serious. I stepped into the quiet supply closet, pressing the phone to my ear. "Bianca? Hi, it's Miss Solis." Her voice, usually so calm and measured, like a soothing balm, was off. Shaking, actually. A nervous tremor that sent a cold prickle up my arms. I need you to come to the school. As soon as you can." My heart rate immediately kicked up. "Miss Solis? Is Alma okay? What happened?" I could hear the frantic edge in my own voice. I pictured Alma, tear-streaked and hurt, and a wave of nausea washed over me. "Alma is fine physically," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laden with something I couldn't quite place. Embarrassment? Disbelief? It's about show and tell." Show and tell? My brow furrowed. What could possibly be so urgent about show and tell? I told her I'd be there in 20 minutes, my mind already racing through the traffic on 18 de Julio. I felt a weird mix of relief that Alma wasn't hurt, and a growing, unsettling anxiety about what could make Miss Solis sound like she'd seen a ghost. When I finally pulled into the school parking lot, my hands were clammy. I practically ran through the brightly painted hallway, past the cheerful drawings tacked to the bulletin boards, until I reached Alma's classroom. Miss Solis was waiting for me just inside, her face pale, her eyes wide and rimmed with red. She held a small bubblegum pink phone in her trembling hands. It looked like a child's toy, almost. Except it wasn't. She led me to a quiet corner of the room, motioning towards a miniature chair. I sat, my knees feeling weak. "During show and tell today," she began, her voice still wavering, "Alma was so excited. She pulled this out of her backpack." Miss Solis gestured to the pink phone, which was now lying on the small table between us. And she announced so proudly, "This is Mommy's secret phone. She only uses it when Mama is at work." The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. Secret phone? My mind reeled. Rocio had no secret phone. I knew all her devices. My blood ran cold. Miss Solis continued, her gaze fixed on her hands, avoiding my eyes. "I tried to laugh it off, you know? Kids say the darziest things. I thought it was a toy, or maybe Rocio's old phone she gave Alma to play with. But then..." She swallowed hard, her eyes finally flicking up to mine, full of a horrified sympathy that made my stomach clench. But then the screen lit up, with notifications. So many notifications. She gently nudged the phone towards me. The screen was still on, displaying a lock screen wallpaper of Rocio, laughing, her arm around Alma. But above that, a cascade of message previews. My eyes, still struggling to process, snagged on a few, emblazoned in bright, sickening clarity. M.A. Who was M.U.A.? A string of heart emojis, a text that read, "Can't wait for you later. Same hotel?" And another, "Just booked the room, baby. See you at 8. Then, a photo preview, undeniably Rocio, laughing, but in a setting I didn't recognize, her hair down, her face flushed, a glass of wine in her hand. And the final, most damning detail, a small white envelope, partially visible in the corner of the photo, with a hotel logo I recognized, the one Rocio had stayed at for a client event last month. My vision blurred. It wasn't just the betrayal, the gut-wrenching, earth-shattering realization that Rocio had been lying to me, to us, all this time. It was Alma, my innocent, bright-eyed daughter, standing in front of her classmates, her teacher, pulling out this. This evidence of her mother's sordid, double life. Things she should never, ever have seen. Things I should never have been discovering this way. Through the trembling hands of a primary school teacher, illuminated by the lurid glow of a secret phone. Standing there in that tiny classroom, surrounded by the vibrant, hopeful artwork of children, the faint smell of crayons and glue, holding that small pink phone that Alma had thought was a harmless toy, I felt like someone had just switched off the oxygen to my brain. My chest tightened, a vice grip squeezing the air from my lungs. My head swam, a dizzying spiral of disbelief and a searing, white-hot anger. Every single memory, every shared laugh, every "I love you," every promise Rocio had ever made about hating secrets, it all crumbled in my hands, turning to dust. The perfect life, the secure marriage, the loving family. It was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, devastating lie, and my own daughter had, in her pure, guileless way, inadvertently ripped it all apart. Standing there in that tiny classroom, surrounded by the vibrant, hopeful artwork of children, the faint smell of crayons and glue, holding that small pink phone that Alma had thought was a harmless toy, I felt like someone had just switched off the oxygen to my brain. My chest tightened, a vice grip squeezing the air from my lungs. My head swam, a dizzying spiral of disbelief and a searing, white-hot anger. Every single memory, every shared laugh, every "I love you," every promise Rocio had ever made about hating secrets, it all crumbled in my hands, turning to dust. The perfect life, the secure marriage, the loving family. It was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, devastating lie, and my own daughter had, in her pure, guileless way, inadvertently ripped it all apart. The shock wasn't just mental. It was a full-body assault. My lungs felt like deflated balloons, struggling to pull in air, even though the classroom was light and airy. My vision tunneled, the edges of my sight blurring, focusing only on the bright, incriminating screen of that damned phone. My hands, which had been clammy just minutes before, now felt numb, yet they clutched the device so tightly my knuckles were white. A buzzing started behind my eyes, like a swarm of angry bees trying to get out, making my head throb with a dull, insistent pain. It wasn't just the raw personal betrayal that gutted me, though that was a cold, sharp blade twisting in my gut. It was the thought of Alma, my little girl, so trusting, so innocent, exposed to this sordid mess. Her teacher, Miss Solace, had looked at me with such profound pity, such awkward, uncomfortable sympathy, and all I could think was, Alma saw this. Alma touched this. Alma displayed this to her classmates. The weight of that realization was crushing, far heavier than any personal heartbreak. A cold, hard wave of anger washed over me. Not a fiery, explosive rage, but a chilling, quiet burn that settled deep in my core. It was an anger so potent it threatened to consume me. But twisted beneath it, tangled and suffocating, was a profound, nauseating guilt. Guilt that I hadn't seen it, hadn't noticed the signs, hadn't protected my child. How could I have been so utterly blind? How could I have been so naive, so trusting, that I missed every single flashing red light? The late client nights, the new wardrobe, the vague unease, it all coalesced into a monstrous indictment of my own failure. My daughter had been dragged into something she couldn't possibly comprehend, something that would undoubtedly taint her perception of trust and love, and I was supposed to be her shield. I felt like I had failed her in the most fundamental way. The knot in my stomach tightened, a hard, unyielding ball of dread and self-reproach. In that instant, a fierce primal resolve ignited within me, cutting through the swirling chaos of emotions. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw that pink phone against the wall, to shatter it into a million pieces, just like my life felt. I wanted to run home, burst through the door, and confront Rocio right then and there, unleash every ounce of the venom building inside me. But then Alma's innocent face flashed in my mind again, her proud declaration about Mommy's secret phone echoing in my ears. No, I couldn't. Not like this. An explosion now would only create more collateral damage. More trauma for Alma. My raw, unbridled rage needed to be caged, channeled. I needed to be calm, calculating. I needed to understand the full scope of Rocio's deception, to gather my thoughts, to formulate a strategy. My primary, non-negotiable mission became crystal clear: protect Alma. No matter the cost to my heart, to my marriage, to my entire life, I would protect my daughter. That was the only thing that mattered. So, I played my part. I forced a mask onto my face, a blank, neutral expression that belied the earthquake raging within me. I looked at Miss Solace, whose eyes were still wide with concern, and managed a weak, almost imperceptible nod. My voice, when it came out, was unnaturally steady, almost flat, a chilling contrast to the tremor in hers. Thank you. Miss Solace, I said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. I'll handle it. It's a misunderstanding I need to clear up. I even managed a small, tight smile, a grotesque caricature of reassurance. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly, but I pushed through the weakness. The phone, still clutched in my hand, felt like a live grenade, ticking, dangerous, but now, a weapon I intended to wield. I murmured a quick goodbye, avoiding any further eye contact, and walked out of that brightly colored classroom, past the innocent drawings and the cheerful sounds of children playing. My mind was already racing, formulating a plan, every fiber of my being focused on the singular, terrifying goal of uncovering the truth and shielding my daughter from its devastating fallout. That night, the air in our apartment felt thick, heavy, suffocating. I went through the motions, preparing a simple dinner for Alma, reading her an extra story, tucking her into bed with a kiss that tasted like ash and unspoken grief. Every fiber of my being was screaming, a silent internal shriek. But outwardly, I was a statue. I was a nurse, after all. I knew how to compartmentalize, how to maintain a calm facade in the face of absolute chaos. But this was different. This chaos was personal, ripping through the very fabric of my life. Alma finally drifted off, her soft breathing the only pure sound in the entire apartment, and I sat in the dim living room, the pink phone still clutched in my hand, its cold plastic a constant, chilling reminder of the abyss I'd stumbled into. Around 9 p.m., I heard the familiar jingle of keys in the lock. Rocio. My stomach twisted into a tighter knot. My heart, which had been racing all day, suddenly felt like it plunged into an icy pool, beating a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I heard her kick off her shoes by the door, the soft thud of her briefcase hitting the floor. "Hey, mi amor," she called out, her voice annoyingly cheerful, the usual greeting. "Alma asleep?" I didn't answer immediately. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady myself, to conjure the neutral expression I'd practiced in the mirror earlier. I heard her footsteps approaching, then stopping. I didn't turn around. I just stared at the blank TV screen, watching my own reflection, a stranger with haunted eyes. The first thing she did, like clockwork, wasn't to greet me properly or even ask about my day. It was to go straight to the small, decorative wooden box on the hall table, the one with the carved lid, where she usually tossed her keys and apparently where she hid that phone. I heard the faint click of the lid, then a tiny, almost imperceptible pause, an unfamiliar stillness. Then her voice, no longer cheerful, but flat, devoid of its usual warmth. It was a subtle shift, but to me it was like a siren going off. "Bianca?" she asked, her tone now clipped, edged with something that wasn't concern, not exactly. More like suspicion, or maybe annoyance. "Where's my other phone?" I turned slowly, deliberately. She was standing by the hall table, her back to the entryway, her eyes narrowed, scanning the surface of the box, then the table. Her face, usually so expressive, was now a mask. Not worried, not apologetic, not even confused. Just calculating. Like she was running through a mental checklist, trying to figure out what had gone wrong in her carefully constructed deception. The blood drained from my face, a cold rush, as the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. Her biggest concern wasn't my feelings, or Alma's innocence, or the fact that her secret was out. It was getting caught. I held up the pink phone, the cheap plastic glowing faintly in the dim light. "This one?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, even to my own ears. It felt like I was speaking from a great distance, watching myself in a movie. Her eyes, which had been darting around the room, snapped to the phone, then to my face. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something. Fear? Panic? But it was quickly replaced by that same cold, almost defensive calculation. She didn't deny it. She didn't pretend not to know what it was. She just stared at it, then at me. "Did Alma tell you?" she asked, her voice still flat, completely devoid of any emotion that resembled remorse or regret. It was a question of information, not of feeling. My heart clenched. It was all I could do not to unleash the torrent of rage and heartbreak building inside me. But Alma, my little girl. I couldn't break down. Not yet. Not in front of her. Not when I was so close to understanding the full extent of this betrayal. I needed to maintain control, to keep my cards close to my chest. Letting her know how much I knew, how deeply I was wounded, would be a mistake. It would give her power, give her the chance to spin her lies, to manipulate the narrative. I needed to be stronger, smarter. So, I kept my voice even, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break, of seeing the raw, gaping wound she'd inflicted. "I need time to think, Rocio," I said, the words feeling like shards of glass on my tongue. A lot of time. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just stated it, a stark, unyielding truth. I walked past her, the phone still in my hand, and went into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't lock it. I didn't want to escalate anything. Not yet. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts, with the evidence, with the crushing weight of what I had to do. The next morning, before Rocio was even awake, I was out the door. I called in sick to my shift, my voice still feeling alien and detached. I needed help, discreet help, and I knew just the person. Martin, a friend from nursing school who now worked in IT at the hospital, was a quiet, meticulous guy, fiercely loyal. I met him at a small cafe near the hospital, away from prying eyes. I skipped the pleasantries. "Martin," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need you to do something for me. Something completely confidential. I slid the pink phone across the table, explaining in clipped, emotionless sentences what Alma had done, what I had seen. His face, usually so calm, went from curious to concerned, then to a look of utter shock as I explained the implications. He didn't ask questions beyond the technical ones. He just nodded, his jaw tight. Later that day, in a quiet, unused office in the IT department, we backed up everything from that damn device. Every single message, every blurry photo, every incriminating call log, every single ping of location history. It felt invasive, violating, but I pushed through the disgust. Each click of the mouse, each file transfer, was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but also a piece of the puzzle, a step towards protecting Alma. As the data copied, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The sheer volume of it was sickening. Months, maybe even a year's worth of a completely separate life, documented in excruciating detail. While Martin worked his magic, I logged into our joint bank account. I sat there, staring at the screen, my eyes scanning through months of transactions. It wasn't hard to find them. Suspicious transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals that were unusually large and frequent, perfectly lining up with the dates of those late client nights and work trips I'd dismissed. The hotel names from the phone's location history and photos started appearing on the bank statements, sometimes as client dinners charged to the company card, sometimes as cash withdrawals just before check-in. It was all there, laid out in black and white, a systematic, cold-blooded deception. My heart felt like it was encased in ice. Rocio hadn't just been having an affair. She had been meticulously orchestrating a parallel life, using our shared finances to fund it, all while I was working my ass off, believing we were building a future together. The hunt for truth had begun, and with every discovery, the drama escalated, twisting the knife deeper into a wound I wasn't sure would ever heal. As I meticulously gathered my evidence, the days that followed were a blur of internal agony and outward composure. Rocio, sensing the shift in my demeanor, the quiet distance I maintained, immediately went into damage control. It was a performance, really a masterclass in manipulation that almost broke me. She'd come home, sometimes later than usual, sometimes right on time, and she'd try to charm her way out of it. Her eyes would well up with tears. "Bianca, mi amor, please don't look at me like that." She'd try to hug me, to touch my arm, but I'd stiffen, a silent wall of ice. She'd sigh dramatically, her voice laced with what sounded like genuine remorse. "I know this looks bad, I really do. But it's just... I've been so overwhelmed, darling. You wouldn't believe the pressure at work, the new clients, the deadlines." And then, the inevitable twist, the subtle shift of blame that made my blood run cold even as a tiny part of me considered it. "And you're always so tired from your shifts, so distant sometimes. I felt so alone. I just needed something to feel alive again, to feel wanted." She'd promised therapy, her voice breaking on cue. "We can fix this, Bianca. We have to fix this for Alma. I swear it was just a mistake, a lapse in judgment. I love you, I love our family." She'd talk about how much she missed us, how this was a temporary madness, a moment of weakness she deeply regretted. And God read it, a part of me, the part that had loved her fiercely for so many years, the part that wanted to believe in the Rocio I thought I knew. That part ached. It yearned to believe her. It was an agonizing tug-of-war in my gut, a nauseating mix of heartbreak and desperate hope. I'd see the tears welling in her eyes, hear the desperate pleas, and a tiny, fragile voice inside me would whisper, "Maybe she's right. Maybe I did push her away. Maybe we can fix this." My nights became a blur of staring at the ceiling, the sound of Rocio's even breathing next to me a stark, chilling contrast to the hurricane raging in my head. Could I believe her? Was it just stress, as she claimed? Did I, in my exhaustion from grueling shifts, inadvertently create a space for this to happen? The thought of breaking Alma's world, of telling her parents were splitting, was a visceral pain, a physical ache in my chest that was almost unbearable. I'd imagine Alma crying, confused, asking why her family was no longer whole, and Rocio. I knew she was cunning. She was brilliant at playing the victim, at turning situations to her advantage. If I didn't handle this perfectly, she would undoubtedly paint me as the villain, the cold, unfeeling nurse who couldn't forgive a mistake. She would fight for Alma, and I knew she would use every trick in the book, every lie she could conjure, to make me look bad, to make me seem unfit or uncaring. The image of Alma being caught in a brutal, ugly custody battle, exposed to Rocio's true, manipulative colors, filled me with a terror far greater than my own heartbreak. Maybe I should just try to make it work. For Alma. For Alma. This internal tug-of-war was agonizing, tearing me apart from the inside. My heart was ripped between the desire to preserve the family unit and the sickening reality of her betrayal. But then came the absolute, chilling twist. This happened a few days later, after Martine had given me the full, encrypted dump of the pink phone's contents on a secure drive. I was alone, late at night, Alma asleep, Rocio at a late client meeting. The irony now a bitter, caustic laugh in my throat. I was scrolling through the endless stream of messages with Lucia. It wasn't just passionate, illicit texts. There were mundane, yet utterly chilling conversations woven between the heart emojis and hotel bookings. My eyes snagged on a particular exchange. "Lucia, I need your advice," Rocio had written. "Bianca just doesn't understand money. She's so trusting. It's almost annoying. I'm worried she'll mess things up." My blood ran cold. Doesn't understand money? My entire body went rigid. I was the one who meticulously managed our budget, who handled our investments, who made sure our savings grew steadily for Alma's future. Rocio barely looked at the bank statements. Then, another message from Rocio, just a few days later. "I'm thinking of moving some of the savings into a separate account, just in case. For the new start." New start? The two words echoed in the silent apartment, louder than any scream. My fingers, trembling now, scrolled faster, a frantic energy coursing through me. This wasn't just an affair, a moment of weakness. This was calculated. This was a plan. And then, a few messages down, nestled innocently among the dozens of other files, was a photo. A PDF file, actually. I clicked it, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold dread washing over me. It opened. And there it was. A lease agreement. For a small apartment in Salto, a city hours away from Montevideo, far from our life, far from my life. The date on the contract was for 3 months from now, barely a quarter away. And the names listed under occupants? Rocio and Alma. No Bianca, just them. The air left my lungs again, but this time it was different. Not shock, not confusion. This was a cold, absolute certainty that settled deep in my bones. The last vestiges of doubt, the tiny slivers of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was a misunderstanding, a temporary lapse, they all shattered into a million pieces. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to abandon me, to take my daughter, to disappear and start a whole new life as if I had never existed. The new start wasn't a euphemism for fixing our marriage. It was a meticulously crafted blueprint for erasing me from Alma's life, from our shared future. I wasn't just betrayed, I was being systematically dismantled, erased from my own family's future, my entire existence with them rendered disposable. In that moment, all the tears, all the questioning, all the agonizing internal struggle vanished, replaced by an unyielding, icy resolve. The anger that had been simmering finally solidified into a hard, diamond-like determination. No more tears, no more questioning my own judgment, no more letting her manipulate me. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about survival, about fighting for my daughter's future, and proving that I was not someone to be discarded. The game had changed, and I was going to play to win. The amicable separation mediation meeting Rocio had suggested, in her characteristically manipulative fashion, trying to control the narrative even then, felt like entering a battlefield dressed in a business suit. I remember the conference room vividly. a sterile, overly air-conditioned space with a polished mahogany table that reflected the fluorescent lights with unforgiving glare. Rocio was already there, perched elegantly on a chair, a practiced, serene expression on her face. She looked at me with a faint, almost pitying smile, clearly expecting me to arrive alone, probably broken, ready to negotiate terms that suited her. Her eyes held a flicker of smugness, a silent challenge that made my gut clench. But I wasn't alone. My lawyer, a quiet, formidable woman named Dr. Morales, followed me in, her presence a silent, undeniable declaration of war. Rocio's smile faltered. Just a fraction, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly as she took in the sight of professional representation. The mediator, a neutral-faced man with tired eyes, seemed to sense the shift in the air immediately. There was no comfortable silence, just a heavy, pregnant pause, thick with unspoken tension. I sat down opposite Rocio, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling the tremor that ran through them. But my face, I prayed, was a mask of calm. I had practiced it for days. Dr. Morales laid her briefcase on the table with a soft thud, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet room. Rocio, recovering her composure, offered a strained saccharine. "Bianca, mi amor, why the lawyer? I thought we could talk this through like adults for Alma's sake." Her voice was dripping with false concern, a performance I was now intimately familiar with. I didn't dignify it with a response. Instead, with a calm that felt utterly alien to the storm raging inside me, I simply slid a thick, neatly organized folder across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Rocio, but it was aimed at the mediator. "We're not here for an amicable separation, Rocio," I said, my voice low, steady, every word carefully chosen. "We're here to discuss my petition for primary custody." The mediator picked up the folder, his brows furrowing. Rocio, still trying to project an air of injured innocence, let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Custody? Bianca, don't be ridiculous. I'm her mother." Dr. Morales then spoke, her voice clear and precise. "My client will be seeking primary custody based on evidence that Rocio has exposed Alma to unsafe situations, displayed a severe lapse in judgment, and has been actively planning to relocate with the child without my client's knowledge or consent, demonstrating an intent to deliberately alienate the child from her other parent." The mediator's eyes, as he flipped through the pages, went from professional curiosity to stark, unvarnished shock. He saw the printed copies of the chats with Lucia, the heart emojis, the hotel addresses, the explicit messages. He saw the bank transfers, the detailed ledger of cash withdrawals. And then, he saw the copy of the lease agreement for the apartment in Salto, with only Rocio and Alma listed as occupants. Rocio's face, which had been so carefully composed, finally cracked. The serene mask shattered. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with disbelief, then quickly turning to a furious, panicked glare. Her cheeks flushed a deep, angry red, and her hands clenched into fists on the table. You went through my phone?" she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, laced with venom. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but an accusation of my supposed transgression. The sheer audacity of her reaction, her focus on my invasion of privacy rather than her own monstrous betrayal, was breathtaking. The mediator, his face now stiff and devoid of any prior neutrality, silently pushed the folder back towards me, his gaze fixed on Rocio with a look of profound disapproval. He didn't need to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. The court proceedings that followed were brutal, draining me dry emotionally, but I held my ground. Every time Rocio tried to spin a tale, to paint me as cold or unfeeling, Dr. Morales calmly presented another piece of irrefutable evidence. The judge, a stern but fair woman, listened intently. The day the judgment came down, a wave of hollow relief washed over me. I was granted primary custody of Alma. Rocio was given supervised visitation, conditional on her ending the affair and attending therapy to address her destructive patterns. It was a victory, yes, but it felt strangely empty, like winning a battle after losing the war for my heart. The accounts she thought she'd hidden, the just-in-case funds she'd siphoned off, were all located and meticulously accounted for. They were then used to calculate a substantial child support payment, ensuring Alma's financial security. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing her carefully constructed financial escape route become a lifeline for the daughter she'd so casually planned to uproot. Oh, and Lucia's husband? I didn't want to be petty, but I also believed in cosmic justice. A few weeks after the court ruling, a discreet anonymous package containing copies of the hotel receipts and some of the more explicit chats between Rocio and Lucia found its way to his office. I imagined his face, the slow dawning horror mirroring my own. I never heard what happened after that, but I knew Rocio went from living two secret, vibrant lives to barely managing one, stripped bare of her illusions, her manipulations exposed for the world to see. It was a complete, comprehensive takedown. I used to think the worst part of betrayal was that moment of discovery, that gut-wrenching realization that everything you believed was a lie. It isn't. The true, lingering agony is realizing how close your child came to growing up, thinking that love always comes with secrets, with locked drawers, with a mother who would plan to vanish and erase a parent without a second thought. That's the real cost. I couldn't stop Rocio from lying, from being who she truly was. But I could, and did, make sure Alma grows up knowing that I chose her truth, her safety, her sense of stability over our broken marriage, that I fought for her even when my own heart felt like it had been shredded. I did what I felt was necessary to protect my daughter and secure our future. I gathered every piece of evidence, I planned, I fought, and I won. But the ghost of that betrayal still haunts me, a cold shadow in the corners of my mind, whispering doubts. I wonder if I was too ruthless in my approach. Was it truly the only way to ensure Alma's safety and my own peace of mind? Or did I become as calculating as Rocio, just for a different cause? How do I move forward from this? Not just for myself, but more importantly, how do I ensure Alma truly heals from this, knowing the painful, ugly truth about her mother? How do I teach her to trust again? To believe in genuine love when her first experience with it was so brutally tainted by deception? Eita for orchestrating such a comprehensive takedown? And what now?